Learning how to trust others actually starts with trusting yourself. I recently received a question on one of my channels that I love a lot because I remember in my journey when I also had this question, which is how do I open my heart and really feel that I can trust other people? Because what we do when we don't want to open our heart, when we are afraid of being hurt, being seen, being vulnerable, being held, loved for who we truly are, and everybody has their own story and that they're playing out in their mind, their own pattern, we can actually want to figure out if we can trust other people before we open our heart. Because logically and rationally, it makes sense. We need to make sure people are trustworthy before we share ourselves with them. And as a result, what this person was asking is I know I have a defense mechanism and that I keep everybody out because I'm worried that I can't trust them. And if I follow this advice and I start opening my heart and I start letting everybody in, then am I going to get ruined in the process? That's the underlying question. How is it possible, Dr. C, to just open your heart and let people in and not get destroyed? Because obviously, there are people out there that haven't done any personal work. And there are those that have done some, but still have a long way to go. And there are others that were born into this world not really needing a lot of work. And there are others that have done quite a bit of work. So if you just open up the gates and let everybody in, how do you keep from being utterly decimated by letting the wrong ones in? And the truth is that I found is that you do let the wrong ones in, and the right ones, and the ones that haven't grown yet, and the ones that already come into the world pretty much perfect. Just kidding, but you know what I mean. And you also let the others in. And you actually never get destroyed. What you do is you feel pain and you learn lessons. And every lesson actually brings you to a new understanding, if not transcendental state. It is actually the threshold of pain that increases over time. And it is our minds that fear that threshold because we don't know what's going to happen. We don't want to be brought to our knees. We don't want to be crying in a fetal position. And some people have negative, unhealthy coping mechanisms that they turn to, addictions and very self-destructive behaviors that they have to work through. And they are frightened that if they get triggered in just the right way, then they're going to spiral out of control. And very often they do. So as a result, what they do in the beginning is they put a block up and shield themselves as much as possible, effectively bypassing the real work, in my personal opinion. Now, I'm not saying that anybody should go off and get lost in the wilderness in their addictions or negative cycles. I'm not advocating for that at all. But I am advocating for this higher understanding of what it's all about. That when we feel a certain way, we are driven to behave in a certain way to alleviate that pain. And some view addiction as though it is not a choice. And when you are in the depths of it, indeed, it is not a choice. But there are many choices along the way. And there are many people who take that journey and choose to exit that pattern. And they do so successfully. This episode is not about solving addiction, and it's quite complicated, and I don't want to oversimplify it. But there is always a way out if you choose to take it. And it may not be the way out that society or your friends or your family says. It may take a different form, a different technique. It may be off the reservation. It may be unconventional, but there's always an exit ramp. When we don't trust ourselves, we lock ourselves away. We are afraid of confronting people or situations or triggers or letting those close to us. So it's easier to build walls and to remain guarded, to take defensive stances. And when you really start to heal your own self-trust, what you'll find is that you no longer are swayed by people's BS anymore. And unfortunately, at least in my experience, you have to let the wrong ones in to figure this out. And it's quite freeing when you do. When you are standing face to face with somebody that's gaslighting you and you know it, you have a choice of how to behave. You may choose an unorthodox approach. You may choose to say nothing and to just watch them and observe. You may choose to confront them. You may choose to some other path. But when you don't have self-trust, you don't have a choice. Not really. Your choice is believe them or not believe them. But you never really know. I guess maybe there is a choice in there, but the truth is that it's instinctual. You often believe them until you're proven wrong, which is why you're afraid of getting your heart broken, because you've done it before. And you automatically trusted when you shouldn't have. And then you came face to face with the consequences of that trust. And so this is what people try to remediate. They try to figure out, is the person trustworthy? And I say, that's the wrong focus. Because when you develop your intuition, when you develop your discernment and your wisdom, you see that there's a variety of people out there who you can trust and who are not so trustworthy and somewhere in between. And you see with this clarity and understanding, almost like being a cat and being able to see in the dark. It's not perfect clear vision. It's a little fuzzy, but you get the sense of where the walls are, where somebody's limitations are. And when you start to look at the whole picture of them, yes, even when you're in love and you're blinded by the hormones and the attractiveness and all of the wishes and the fantasies and all of that, you start to understand that people show up as the best version of them on any given day. But sometimes that version of them changes. And it's still their best for that Tuesday. But their best may be somebody else's worst. And when you see people as a kaleidoscope of presentations of various states of mind and being and emotions and shadow and light and all of the beautiful aspects to humans, what you observe is that there's a lot of variability in the people that you know and that you love and that you trust. And when you develop self-trust, you no longer rely on somebody showing up in a certain way to protect your heart because you're protecting your own heart. And with your wisdom and your discernment, you can have somebody who you're falling in love with stand right in front of you and tell you the most bold-faced lie because they're feeling insecure and they're triangulating against a friend of yours that they're threatened by, trying to get you to pick sides against that friend and closer to them. So they make up something that you know is false. And you watch them flounder in their deception as you maintain a neutral expression at first. Then you might even pretend to buy it because your job there is done. You have observed, you have seen what you have come to see. You know that this is a choice to take the exit ramp, and you know that you're taking it. And you don't need to necessarily tell somebody this heavy in their shadow exactly how you're moving when they are treating you with such disrespect and contempt. When you learn to trust yourself, you never need to worry. Well, I shouldn't say never. You rarely need to worry about the depth of other people's shadow because you can see it coming. You can feel it. And somebody can be gaslighting you and telling you what a great time they had. And you know in your heart of hearts that you're not going to hear from them. They're going to ghost you. Because you understand that humans, for whatever reason, and I'm differentiating because in the time-space continuum where I'm at, we're currently going through a flux from binary to quantum societal arrangements. And there will be other types of listeners on these recordings, but my listeners right now are predominantly human at this time, but I am expanding my thoughts and my speech to allow room for additional listeners in the future. Or now, if they happen to exist. Here, so when you understand that humans engage in social niceties, politeness, and they say things that they don't necessarily intend on, and that this is normal. This is actual normal behavior. Yes, Jill. Oh, it's so great to see you. Yeah, let's grab lunch next week. Yeah. Oh, perfect. Yeah. And let me check my calendar and I'll get back to you. Crickets. You start to understand that there is a mode of operating in our world that requires certain responses. And there are other responses which are not required, but people do because they want to be nice and they don't want to hurt feelings. And sometimes they're just cowardly, or they perceive correctly or incorrectly that the person can't actually handle the truth. And they make a value judgment to do the slow fade or to ghost in a situationship because you were actually option B and option A looks like they're coming around and they want to wholeheartedly invest in option A. And from their position, that's a fair arrangement. Like they have options and they have preferences. We should all have options and preferences. It's the way we handle those in alignment with who we want to be. And for some people, they don't value crystal clear honesty and transparency. It's not important to them. And so they lead their life that way. And that's fine. It's a personal choice. So when you understand this about humans, you understand that not everybody's going to be forthcoming and forthright with you. And even if they say that they're honest people and that they value honesty, they might actually mean that they value people being honest to them, but they don't necessarily reciprocate that. And so you start to see the interplays of others, and you start to realize that it's quite maddening, if not downright foolish sometimes, to expect that you are going to be able to entrust the most secret parts of your heart and your vulnerability to a human being that hasn't done the work, that's not interested in doing the work, that doesn't even know what the work is, or that has done the work, but is not quite deep into their journey enough to really take responsibility for their actions, even when somebody that they love is looking them dead in the eye, expecting them to come clean. And they choose not to. And they choose to maintain their deception and doing you wrong in the shadows. And then you're going to entrust people who are not mature or ready for that level of relationship. You're going to give them your heart. No, you're not. No, you're not going to do that anymore, because when you trust yourself, you don't need to do that. You can actually let people be exactly who they are in any given moment. You don't have to even feel the burden or the shame of choosing wrong, because you choose yourself first to protect yourself. And with wisdom and insight and intuition and clarity and understanding of patterns of behavior, particularly when people are heavy in their shadow, when you hear that they're heavy in their shadow with other people, then you know that they're going to be heavy in their shadow with you, because you understand that that's what it means to be heavy in one's shadow, is that somebody is drowning in their patterns and they don't even necessarily see it yet. And that's okay. It's part of the journey. It's part of the shadow work journey. And karma is a thing. Not everybody believes in it, but when you see people start to get karma, then you know that they are heavy in their shadow. And when you trust yourself to be able to make the right decision. And as a result, it frees you from the need to have to vet people. It frees you from your chains and your boxes and the walls and the defensiveness, because I have found personally that it becomes quite easy to trust. It actually is so easy to love now that it freaks people out. It actually disturbs people how easy it is to love, which is why I developed this whole true love coaching, because I realized just how common it was that people were actually afraid of love and true love, not just romantic love. I'm not talking about love in general. I'm talking about the unconditional love that you give that is not contingent on all of the gestures and the texting and the social mores of today's world of what it means to be in love. Like there's a whole other language of love, a spiritual love, and it comes easy and free, and you don't even have to really know somebody, because you can feel their soul, you can feel their essence of their consciousness, you can feel their vibration, and it's beautiful to commune with people at that level, but most people don't even know it exists. And they're so frightened. They're so frightened to be vulnerable, to be authentic, that they close themselves off out of fear that they're going to be hurt, because this is what we all fear, right? It's completely normal. So we keep ourselves in these cages and we go up to the edge of the cage and we like peek out somebody else's cage peeking out at us. We're like, hey, you, can I trust you? And they're like, hey, can I trust you? That's the question. So we do this dance when actually we can bypass all of that. When we trust ourselves, we just walk out into the crowd with our magnetism and we select people and we say, yes, I would like to get to know you better. Yes. Let's see how it goes. And then you let people in slowly as they reveal to you who they really are in any given moment. You don't attach to just the first presentation that you see. You take the kaleidoscope of them, their worst day, their best day, their everyday self, their transcendental self, their 5D self, their 3D self, their lower 3D self, their shadow 3D self. That's a good one. Like, who are they when they don't get what they want? That is more telling than who are they when everything is going well for them and when the world is giving them yeses. And when you trust yourself to be able to make decisions of who to let in and to what degree and what capacity. And you move people accordingly. And it's not a fixed, you're in, so you're in like Flynn for the rest of it. No, it's this understanding that people are not always going to be in their love and light side. And sometimes they're going to be in their depths of hell, whatever that looks like for them. And sometimes, depending on how people behave when they're in their own personal hell, you don't want to be around them. Sometimes you do. So you understand the whole flavor and spectrum of humanity. So you don't have any false pretenses that the person who shows up on day 1 is the person that you're going to see on day 100. And as a result, you don't fear their shadow. You're curious because you want to understand, are we compatible? Even at our lower 3D operating selves? Or do we have to partition ourselves out and just interface in the 5D? There's something beautiful about truly trusting your wisdom. You don't fear relationships or people in the same way that you do before. Because you just know, even if you get it wrong, that you're going to self-correct. And the system that you build is going to allow people certain levels of access to you that is in accordance with the beautiful wisdom and lessons that you've learned. Because now you know how to trust yourself.